and welcome. Today, I am super duper excited. We are starting our cleanse, and part of spring and fall cleansing, part of any cleansing in Ayurveda involves eating kitchari, the one of the most healing foods that we have. And the lovely Danielle Boucher is going to be showing us. She's going to be having a cooking class for us today, showing us how to make kitchari. It is pretty straightforward, and you'll get into a flow, and you're going to learn how to love making it. And it's also something that you can get creative and bring in your own spices and your own unique flavor to the dish. But there's the building blocks, if you will, of making kitchari, and I'm super excited to see how Danielle is going to present that to us today.
Today, I'm going to be sharing how we cook kitchari. I have my beautiful La Crusette here. And so we're going to go ahead, and it's just a small cast iron pan that I like to make my kitchari in. It makes it a little bit easier. And I tend to really like how it comes out. There we go. Well, that's centered on here. So now I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to use coconut oil because I have a lot of heat going on. I have coconut oil here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of that in here at the bottom. It recommends about 2 tablespoons. I use a soup spoon, and it's about 2 tablespoons. I like the coconut oil in it because I really like how it gives it a little bit more depth of flavor. And then we're going to go through the recipe that I'm using is from the same book that I posted on school. So I'm going to actually post this recipe when we're done here today. So you guys have this also. I'm going to go ahead and start with mustard seed first because they take the longest to kind of pop. And when you're making kitchari, you really want to bloom all of your spices. So right now I'm melting all of the oil down. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of mustard seed. And I'm doing things doshically specific for me. So since I'm more pitta, I don't want the heat. But if you're more kapha, you might want to add a full teaspoon instead of a 1/2. And I'm using a smaller, I'm using less. So I'm using a 1/4 cup of rice and a 1/2 cup of mung that I've soaked overnight. And then I've rinsed. And so the mustard seed usually takes a few to get started. So I like to just roll it around. And then as soon as it starts to pop, I'll show you guys because it looks pretty cool as they start to effervesce. I wish there was some way that I could show smell because they smell really good as they start to pop too. Okay, so you'll see how they're starting to pop and get all nice and poppy and golden. And so I'm going to add the rest of my seeds. And so I'm using fennel seed, which is very good for pitta, and it's a good digestive. I'm going to use 1 full teaspoon of fennel seed. And then cumin is another one that you use in a kitchari recipe. I'm going to use black cumin because it is more doshically appropriate for me. It's cooler. Regular cumin tends to be hot and heating, so black cumin is cooler. And so I'm going to add a full teaspoon of that in there too. So now I'm going to let all of these seeds just kind of meld together. They're popping. They have like little, it almost looks like they're like frying the seeds. Again, I wish you guys could smell because it smells divine. And then once I let these cook for just another, like, I don't know, 30 seconds, then I'm going to add my dry spices. Perfect. So some of the dry spices that we're going to be using today are ground coriander. I have a mango turmeric that I had gotten from India that I just love, love, love. And then we're going to be using just a pinch of hinga stock. I'm going to lower my flame down a little bit because you don't want to burn your spices. And that's something that's very common, especially when you first start making kitchari. There's a fine line between effervescing the spices and then going ahead and having them burn. So this is the mango turmeric. So this, I'm gonna put a full teaspoon because I'm having a lot of inflammation issues. So I'm making this a little bit more tailored to me again. And so I'm just gonna sprinkle that in there and it fries up very quickly. And then the ground coriander, I'm going to just use a half a teaspoon. Never usually use ground coriander. I'm using it for this recipe. I most times will use the seeds. But I did a little bit of research and I guess the ground coriander absorbs better. And then I have my Hingeshock. So I like Hingeshock. I know everybody says it's a little weird. I do just a little tiny pinch in there. So all I did was sprinkle maybe 2 fingerfuls. I always use a little bit of baked veggies. So I chop some celery and carrots and I chop them very, very fine. So they're going to go in there now. We're going to let them just kind of get a little cooked up. Kind of mix everybody together. Get all those seeds and all that oil all over those veggies. I like my veggies to have a little bit of a tooth bite when I eat my kitchari. So I don't want them too soft, but they do get a little softer at the longer the kitchari cooks. This recipe takes about 40 to 50 minutes to cook, and that gives you a little bit of a bite. If you cook it longer, the veggies will get softer to the point where they really start to just mush and disintegrate into everything. Let's see. Okay, and now next we're gonna add in, I like to add the rice first before I add the monk. So we're gonna add in the rice. And I've already soaked and rinsed it. It's been rinsed 3 times and it was soaked overnight. And I add the rice.
It hasn't been cooked, right?
The rice has not been cooked, it's just been soaked. Yeah, just an overnight soak. And if you're short on time, you can do a 2-hour soak, which is just boiling water. There we go. We got all that together. So I just mix that around a little bit. And then the last to go in is my moon. This has been soaked and rinsed. And so I'll just start chucking that in there. And then everybody does their recipes a little bit differently. I like to put the fresh grated ginger in now. And so I will go ahead and do that. And funnily enough, I got 2 different types of ginger and I have to show you guys. So this is what I normally get from the grocery store, very small. This is what I got from the grocery store yesterday. Look at the size of that thing. It's ginormous. I couldn't even believe it. Like from this to this guy. So I'm gonna go ahead and grate some of this fresh ginger in there as everything's kind of cooling down. And I usually like to grate about a quarter finger. And so I just use a little cheese grater, grate some of that in there, get it all nice and pretty. And so then we'll stir this around a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and I'm going to add 4 cups of water to this to go ahead and let this kind of sit and cook down. And then, as I said, it takes about 40 to 50 minutes for this to cook to where it's going to be something that would taste good and be edible. I add a little pinch of salt at the end of the cooking. It's not a good idea. I add a little pinch of salt at the end of the cooking, and sometimes I'll add pepper. Since I'm dealing with so much heat right now, though, we're going to stay away from any kind of pepper or anything like that. In the winter, sometimes too, I'll even add fresh pipoli, which would be really nice because it's a little bit more unctuous. It's got a little bit more of the oil to it. And then I'll garnish over the top because of my heat. I like to garnish with lime and a little bit of fresh cilantro. Sometimes I do make that little sauce that I was telling you guys about where it's like a green sauce. So right now I have 2 bunches of cilantro in my fridge. and I have a little bit of fresh basil from the garden. So I'm going to take all of that together and I'm going to make just a little, almost like a curry sauce that when I do get to eat this, I will be able to spoon that over the top. And then I usually allow this to come to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, I lower it down to a very nice simmer, and then I will let this sit. And so Kitchari tends to be one of those things that people get all, oh my God, it seems so challenging and seems so hard. And so I wanted to show you guys just how easy it is to put it together and make yourself a really healthy, delicious meal. And we'll be using this as we're moving forward during our cleanse. So this will be one of those helpful things. In the recipe, now there's a bunch of different things that she does say. So if you're using, say your vata, she says to put in sweet potato and mustard greens. If you're pitta, she says to put in chopped kale, butternut squash, and coconut cream. And if you're kapha, she says to put in cauliflower and chopped dandelion greens. And so me, personally, I like to put zucchini, which is got a high water content, and I like to put asparagus, which is very good to flush the urinary system. I like those two in there. And then I don't know why lately, usually I use a lot of spinach, but lately I have been just stuck to arugula and it's been my best friend. So I probably will put some arugula in there. I don't put my veggies in until this is cooked up pretty much. Because again, like I said, I like my veggies to have a little bit more of a crunch to them. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll saute and cook the veggies in a separate pan and then put that over the top of my kitchari so that I have kind of two variations in texture. That tends to be one of the things. And Sahara Rose recommends that if you like texture, that you can throw flax seeds. You can grind them, or you could just chop them, or you could use them whole and throw that over the top of this. So, does anyone have any questions or any comments or anything while we're watching the pot boil?